Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the November 14th, 2019 inaugural meeting of the Sunshine Coast Regional District Board. I would like to acknowledge that we are within the territory of the Sechelt First Nation and call the meeting to order at 1:31 p.m. Our first order of business will be the election of the chair. The procedure for election of the chair is set out by the Board Procedures Bylaw, which states that at each inaugural meeting, the corporate officer will call for nominations for chair and will conduct a vote by secret ballot. If only one candidate is nominated, the candidate will be declared elected by acclamation. I will call for nominations 3 times. At the close of nominations, if more than one candidate has been nominated, each candidate for the chair will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to address the board in favor of their candidacy, and in the order the nominations were received. If an election by voting is required, I will hand out blank ballots on which you will write the name of the candidate of your choice. We will collect and count the ballots and inform the board if there is a successful candidate. A majority of votes of the members present is required to elect the chair, which means that one of the candidates today must receive at least 5 votes to be elected. If no one receives at least 5 votes, the voting will be repeated. When the voting is repeated, all names will remain on the ballot unless a nominee withdraws. Are there any questions or requests from the board relating to the process? Would the board members like to know how many votes each candidate receives? And if so, would one of the directors like to make a motion to that effect? Okay. I will call a first time for nominations for the position of chair for the Sunshine Coast Regional District.
I'd like to nominate Lori Pratt.
Director Pratt, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
I will now call for nominations for a second time. I will now call for nominations for a third and final time. There being no further nominations, I declare Director Pratt elected as chair of the Sunshine Coast Regional District by acclamation.
Thank you. All right.
So I'll leave this here for you, and
Perfect.
if there's an election, I'll be back.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. I guess that's necessary. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you, board, for your continued support of me in this position, and I'm very honored to continue to represent you and be your chair. And with that, my first official duty would be to proceed over the election of vice chair for 2020. So the election of the vice chair will follow the same procedure as the election of the chair. At the close of nominations, if more than one candidate has been nominated, each candidate will be given a minimum of 3 minutes to address the board in favor of their candidacy and in the order the nominations were received. If an election by voting is required, the corporate officer will hand out blank ballots, or I guess I will from here, because they're with me. A majority of the votes of the members present is required to elect the vice chair, which means that one of the candidates must receive at least 5 votes to be elected. If no one receives at least 5 votes, the vote is repeated. When the voting is repeated, all names remain on the ballot unless a nominee withdraws. So with that, I will call a first time for nominations for the position of Vice Chair for the Sunshine Coast Regional District. Director Beamish?
I nominate Director Seegers.
Director Seegers? Director Seegers, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I will now call for nominations for a second time. I will now call for nominations for a third time. There being no further nominations, I declare Director Seegers elected as Vice Chair of the Sunshine Coast Regional District by acclamation. Okay. Is that a big woo? Excellent. Okay. All right. So with that, this must be Sherry's water. All right. Okay. So we have other business to attend to today, and with that, we have an amended agenda in front of us that has a couple of items that have been added from the earlier meeting today. So may I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? So moved. Seconded. Are there any other additions? Okay. Director McMahon.
I'd like to add an item under new business.
Okay.
Green waste site, Gibson's green waste site.
Gibson's green waste site?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll make that number 8 under new business. Okay. And directors, are there any other additions to the agenda? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of adopting the amended agenda? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay. Minutes. So we have 2 sets of minutes on Annex A and Annex B of your package. First off, the regular board meeting minutes of October 24th. May I have a motion to, actually, I think we can look both of these at the same time. So for Annex B, A and B, may I have a motion to receive and adopt, please? So moved. Seconded. Are there any errors, omissions, additions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Was there any business arising from the minutes or unfinished business? Okay. We have no presentations or delegations today. We do have reports, so I'm going to ask for a receipt of all the reports. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, so first off, number 4 on our agenda, Annex C in your packages, pages 13 to 16, the Corporate and Administrative Services Committee recommendations, numbers 1 through 7, and 11 of October 24th. Directors, do you want to pull out any of those recommendations to debate separately before we move those as a whole? Okay, seeing none, may I ask for a motion to adopt those recommendations, please? So moved. Seconded. Any further questions or debate on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Item number 5, Annex D on the agenda, the Special Corporate and Administrative Services Committee recommendations, numbers 1 through 7 of October 31st, 2019. Are there any of those recommendations you'd like to pull out before we adopt them as a block? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adopt. So moved. Seconded. All those okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. And then item 5A, the Planning and Community Development Committee recommendations, numbers 4 through 5 and 9 of earlier today. Those are on your amended 18A to B of the items we were just handed out as we arrived for this meeting. Directors, do you want to talk about any one of those, discuss any one of those separately, or are you okay to adopt those? You move adoption. Seconded. Any further discussion? We had a great discussion earlier today, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, we have no communications today. We have number 6 on our agenda. We have a motion that the resignation of Ken Carson from the Area E Advisory Commission be received. So I'll look to my Area E Director. Would you like to move that? So moved. Seconded? Seconded. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. We have no bylaws today, but we have our director's reports. Oh, so where to start today? We'll start with the newest member here, Director Toth from Seashells, and we're going to start with you for your director's report, please.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Being new here, I don't have a whole lot to report, but I do appreciate the opportunity to sit here. Not that it was up to you guys, it was up to fellow council, but here I am, and that's my report. Thank you. We're
so happy to have not decided to have you here, but we'd still welcome you to the table. So thank you for joining us, and thank you to Seashelt for sending you over. So next on my list, I'm going to go over to Area A, and Director Lee, please.
I didn't do anything this. Oh, I actually, on behalf of the SCRD, I laid the wreath at the cenotaph on November 11th, and it was a very nice ceremony there. They do a good job every year, and I was very pleased with the attendance. There was about 400 people there. It gets bigger every year. Quite moving to attend to something like that. Other than that, it's just business as usual, nothing unusual to report, so I'm just going to keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lee. We will move to the other end of the coast and West Howe Sound. And Director Hiltz, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to go back to October 25th. I went on a tour to the Firkham Plateau area on Gambier Island, which is a off-grid, off-everything community over there, about 90 properties. Particular interested in emergency preparedness and fire, and Matt Trent accompanied us, and Stephen Grappel from BC Wildfires was there. So it was a very informative and useful dialogue with the community to understand their issues. So, and thanks to the Firkham Plateau people for organizing that. The 25th was the Howe Sound Community Forum hosted by the District of Squamish at the Cheakamus Center, and that's twice a year that we're meeting. 11 local governments, 1 First Nations, MLAs, MPs, civil society, about 58 people altogether. Couple things out of that. It's interesting just how sound connects everyone in that area. And we are so similar to the other people on Howe Sound. Squamish Landfill, they have 8 years left in their landfill, which I didn't know. Their affordable housing is an issue for them. Sea level rise, overcrowding in the Joffrey Lakes area. That reminds me of the Skookumchuck. Popularity has become a bit of an issue there. So it's a really informative time to talk with the people around the Howe Sound, and we border Metro Vancouver Area A, which is electoral area, the only electoral area A. There's just some weird connections and all this type of stuff. What else about that? On November 11th, I was at the Anna Vets ceremony on Gambier Island. There's a color parade. It has a strong history on Gambier Island, and it follows with a luncheon. And I'm guessing there was over 100 people. Yeah, the seasonal people are there. It's one of those. It's probably their second biggest kind of gathering that they're saying. So it's a very important ceremony for the people. It ends up at SCRD Park, which used to be where a building was burnt down to the ground. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Director Hiltz. Next on my list, Area E, and Director McMahon, please.
Well, last week, last Tuesday, we had our inaugural PMAC meeting. That went, I think, really well. I think we're pretty happy with the caliber and variety of community volunteers at that board. At the meeting, Ian Wynn was elected chair, and Silas White was elected vice chair. And so I really look forward to working with this group going forward, because, oh boy, do we have lots to do when it comes to solid waste. After that meeting, we had the rural directors meeting, and I was really interested to hear what all the different rural directors are doing to connect with their community. Each one of us is doing different things because each of our communities is different. And it was really intriguing. I'm looking forward to hearing more about Director Pratt's Youth Council when we get to our youth discussion. But it was a good conversation. I attended the climate Leaders Conference in Richmond, November the 7th and 8th. I did submit a written report on that meeting to the board and senior staff, but I just wanted to, note a couple of things there. The message from David Miller, former Toronto mayor, is that while nations are deadlocked on climate change, cities are providing leadership, and we have to. We can't solve the whole crisis by ourselves, but we can have a significant impact. At an urban level, the largest drivers of GHG emissions are transportation and home heating, and we urgently need strategies to deal with both of those. Climate Ready BC has opened a public engagement that will be open until January the 10th, and you can go to their website and take a survey. It's actually quite an interesting survey. I took it because I never recommend a survey unless I've taken it first to see if it's any good. But I thought it was intriguing. So I'll be putting a link to that on my website, and it'll be in my next newsletter. And I also wanted to share the transportation factoid that I got there, which is that since 1990, the BC population has grown 30%, but the number of vehicles on the road has increased 70%. So road transportation is the fastest growing source of GHG emissions in the province. And there's a lot of reasons driving this, but one of them is demographic change, so that urban areas are losing population, partly because that's where the number of single person households is growing the fastest, and affordability issues, among others, are driving families out to suburban and rural areas. And so, of course, that drives more driving. So it was a very interesting conference, and I also look forward to the AVICC climate next meeting, which is in December. I did not manage to get to the Bear Human Conflict meeting on Sunday at Frank West Hall, but Mayor Beamish went, and I am looking forward to more outcomes from that. There is quite an active group that's formed that is working on the issue. They had, well, I'll let Mayor Beamish report on that, but I'm following them on Facebook. They have a pretty active Facebook group right now. And my Remembrance Day activity, as it were, was attending the screening of They Shall Not Grow Old, done by the Film Society at the Heritage Playhouse, which is the director Peter Jackson's film where he restored World War I footage to show very vividly what the experience was of being a foot soldier in the trenches in World War I. I think some of the people in the audience were fairly shocked about how gruesome it was. Since I've read a lot on the war, I actually know that he backpedaled considerably because it was worse than he showed, but still fascinating. Yeah, good to reflect on. Finally, I had the Elphinstone Community Association meeting last night. We started with a presentation from Angela Kronig from Streamkeepers. She's been here on the coast for many years and gave a lot of historical perspective on how our streams and the fisheries have changed. It's pretty disturbing, frankly, but nonetheless interesting, pretty well attended too. And after I delivered my report, somebody in the audience asked me to prepare a glossary for SCRD terminology, so I'll be working on that one. Thank you.
You can provide that to directors too. Thank you, Director McMahon, and I really appreciated your notes on the climate conference, as well as Director Ties had also circulated some information as well. So it sounds like it was a really informative conference. Okay, we're going to go over to the town at Gibsons, and Director Beamish, please.
Thank you. did some of the other things, House Sound Forum and other things, and uniquely, I attended a conference call on the Provincial Urban Deer Advisory Committee on November the 7th, and we considered 3 applications for deer management. Interesting processes. Each community had a different approach. One area was to shoot them. The other area was to trap and shoot them, and the other one was to treat them for contraceptively. So it's very, 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 very different things going on in the province, so that we'll see which is more effective. That's right. That's right. Yeah. And the local government show, I attended that on the 7th also with Director Seegers and Director Pratt, and we had once again an hour interview on that, and that was very interesting. Iced tea on the 8th, last Friday. We traveled over to Courtenay, and it was a very enjoyable day and visit, and meeting with Iced Tea and looking at the applications again there for support. And that was very well done, and a nice trip. It would happen to be a nice day for flying across there, and it was a good time spent. I did on the 10th attend the Bear Awareness Group, and there was about 30 people there on a Sunday afternoon in the middle of a long weekend, which was really interesting, and very concerned. All 3 conservation members turned out for it. Conservation officers, rather, turned out for it. My takeaways were, certainly more aware. I wasn't aware of how many bears had been put down in our own area, our own community. I think there's 5 this year, but also some of the issues, and primarily garbage and fruit trees and the like. And also, I don't think we are quite. We're aware of what's happening with our water. We're aware of what's happening with our forests. We're aware of what's happening with sea level rise, but we're not aware of the impact of climate change on our wildlife, and that's something we need to become more aware of. We had the opportunity, subsequent to that, to have a strategic planning workshop for a final go at our strategic plan, and we added a provision in there for dealing with climate change impacts on wildlife and looking at that, because I think that's very important. And I think the more frequent interfaces we're having with wildlife on the coast here right now, it could well be associated with climate change issues. I know further up the coast, some of the communities are reporting more grizzly bear activity because of the lack of the salmon. So more grizzly bear activity around inhabited areas. So that is all very possible. And I know that, this year especially in my community of Parkland, the frequency of coyotes in the neighborhood, just waiting for those small dogs to come out and play, is surprising. And they actually sit pretty much across the street from my place, just in that point that darkness turns to you can't see anything. And you shine the flashlight there, and you might get some eyes looking back at you. So it's very interesting, much more than I've seen there in the past. And we've been there for 5 years now, but this year, coyotes walking up and down the street at night. And it's very interesting. So the impact of climate change on wildlife is something I think we should all be attentive to. We had a meeting with area neighbors around the Marine Room. Now that's underneath the Arts Building, which is next door to the library, between the library and the museum. And we are going to have a homeless shelter in there for a period of time. The homeless shelter was scheduled to go into the Salvation Army this year. And with the fire of the Salvation Army, we looked for alternative space, and we were unable to find alternative space, so council agreed to the Marine Room as a stopgap measure, so that we had about 10 people, both library, play school, museum, area residents, all interested, and we had a very good meeting and a good turnout and good conversation. Salvation Army was there, Range City was there. And so the plan is that as soon as the funding gets in place for Range City, that the shelter will be set up there, and it'll run 7 days a week. And when the Salvation Army space is repaired, the shelter will move back up to there. And they're also looking at that as a potential long-term shelter, but we just don't know. We do need to not go through this every year. And so far, that's what we had to do, is find a space every year. But we were able to respond to questions and concerns, and wonderful people. Violet Weingarten was out, and if you know Violet, she's just a wonderful person. And she said, she offered 20 wool blankets. She said, if you need wool blankets, I'll offer 20 wool blankets, and I'll take them home every week and wash them, and they'll be clean every week, sort of thing. She doesn't even live in that neighborhood, sort of thing. And so other people were volunteering for food, socks, and what else can we do, sort of thing. So that, and that was our experience last year too, when people got through that initial shock of, oh no, you're going to put homeless people next door to me, and we went through that conversation. It was, well, how can we help? What can we do? And checking in with the neighbors periodically, as I did last year, they were very supportive of it. So we're looking forward to getting that one started. I attended with Director McMahon and Director Seegers the Sunshine Coast Tourism Association annual general meeting last night, and it was also very interesting. It was at the Sunshine Coast Golf Course, and very interesting. I won't bore you with all the stats. I'm sure you know all the stats, but to say we're getting busy and we're staying busy, and we're looking to get more busy on the Sunshine Coast, and we're very fortunate to have that tourist association representing our interests. On Tuesday night coming, our council will be very pleased to appoint Ellis McKenzie, grade 12, and Gravity Guinard, grade 11, to council as our youth representatives for this coming year. So they will be installed on Tuesday night, and we're very fortunate again to have two very, very good candidates. We had several candidates. I think we had 6 or 7 people who applied, and it's always difficult to make a selection, but we're very pleased to have 2 new students coming forward this year. We have intentionally had a grade 11 and a grade 12, so that next year the grade 11 will provide continuity as she becomes a grade 12 student, provided she still wants to continue to hang with council. So they will be there, and I invite anybody to come and participate or observe that ceremony and the appointments. They're very good, and we are going to send a fairly broad news release out, at least to all of ABICC, letting them know, because we're trying to encourage other communities to model the success that we've seen here with this program, and very hopeful. I know there are some communities that are interested in it, so we'll just keep telling them what we're doing and how we're doing it, and that's the key. So, okay, and that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Director Beamish.
I just report one other thing. Sure. I looked at my calendar. This is my final board meeting as the director representative for Gibson's. David Kroll will be appointed on December the 3rd. I will be the alternate, but the next 2 meetings I have other commitments, and I thought the next meeting, rather than kind of come and go and come back, I thought I'd just have David Kroll, because I think a lot of things you're talking about are going to impact into the next year, and so it's important that he be aware of that. And the following meeting, I'm actually in Vancouver on a workshop, so that he will be taking that, and I will be sitting in his place and coming here when he wants me to. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Beamish. It's been a pleasure to have you here for the last year and providing your expertise from being on the other side. Oh, you're such a pleasure. That just totally lost my train of thought, but thank you. It's been fantastic. Don't threaten us like that. Thank you very much, Director Beamish. So I'll go to the other mayor that's at our table, Director Seekers. Tell us what's going on in Sechelt.
Thank you. Three of us, actually, Councillor Rowe, Councillor McLean, and I went to Victoria for a Livable Cities Forum. It was interesting, the conversation that we had the first day. It was all elected officials, and they came from across Canada and the U.S. We had, and then they put us into tables. So at my table, we had councillors and acting mayors from Newfoundland, from Ontario, from Manitoba, from the Northwest Territories, and Vancouver area. And what they were having us do is reframe the conversation around climate change. What has been recognized is that the topic climate change is very politicized now, and it's very polarizing in the community. People are either on one side or the other. So they said, what if we were to reframe the conversation, and instead of talking about climate change, we looked at impacts of climate change on health and well-being. So if temperatures are going to get warmer, who's that going to impact in our community, and what do we need to do to prepare for that? So it's a health and well-being lens. And we can take that and put that towards everything from budget discussions to our day-to-day decisions. And they had a professor from McGill University there for one of the sessions during the first day, and they had us do an exercise. So they gave us little cards, and I have a set of cards, and they said, if you're looking at your budget from a health and well-being viewpoint, we want you to take all of these items, so all of the various things that we spend money on, and at our table we couldn't actually, I think we took out 2 of the cards, but across the country somebody or other had one of the pieces in their budget. And we had to look at, would you keep the budget amount the same? Would you increase it? Would you decrease it? And what was your rationale for that? So we had a lot of conversation using the other lens rather than just climate change, but looking at health and well-being. For example, if we did more public consultation around healthcare or some of the things we're doing in the community, would we need to spend as much time or as much money on policing? Right? So you started playing that off one after the other, and so it was quite a lively conversation. Probably the best workshop I've been to in a long time. Every session was set up with a presenter who gave a framework, and then it was turned back over to us for discussion and deliberation. So very much learning from each other for the full 3 days. We ended up the third day at the end going and taking in question period at the legislature. So we got introduced in the legislature by our MLA, so that was kind of fun too. I attended a client legal seminar. We had the CAO and I from Sechelt went, and some of the regional district staff were there as well. Some of the sessions that were, the way the format is, the legal firm does half-hour sessions on each of the topics, and then we go away with a USB stick with a whole bunch of background information. So that information is available. I think the staff here have it, could provide it to directors. If you'd like it, I could provide it as well. Some of the topics that were covered were things like ride hailing. So do we have bylaws for licensing? How do we manage that, right? Those kinds of things. Social procurement was talked about, cybersecurity. And they talked about how governments are really getting hit with cybersecurity. All kinds of ransomware that's been happening and the cost that it's been to municipalities. So they said make sure you've got processes in place. They said even their law firm had been hit. And they said it's very important to have backups. They lost 3 days worth of work because of their backups, right? But they had backups, so 3 days. So look personally, what would that look like if all of a sudden all of your material, all of your information disappeared? So you need to look at what can you do with regards to backup and manage the risk. Housing best practices, so there's all kinds of different information about, I think more geared towards municipalities, but there may be some in there as well. We tend to look at things like DCCs or amenity contributions, etc. They came up with a whole list of various items that we could look at. What are government powers for under climate change and adaptation? So there's information in there on that, which I'm sure some will be interested in. What else? As council, we took part in a totem pole carving with Tony Paul, and that was a lot of fun. We talked about our first year in office, and it was interesting to hear from the various council members on what it's been like for them. Some said it was what they'd expected. Others said it was not. But it was good. The chair and I met with School District 46 on a meeting, just again to reach out to them. Iced tea's been mentioned. Remembrance Day was interesting in the District of Sechelt. I happened to stand beside Marcel Cruteau, 96 years old, and if you read the Coast Reporter, he actually just wrote a book, and he just did a book launch. He's 96 years old. He's a decorated hero of the Second World War. He ran 39 missions, and I took him along to the viewing dais at the end where we saluted everybody that went by, and he was thrilled. It was really cool to see him. It was great. We've had a housing advisory committee meeting. Our housing advisory is going to be focusing on rental housing at this point. We recognize that's a huge need in Sechelt. There is the housing needs assessment that's being done in Gibsons, and they're looking. So the committee said they want to wait for that before they take on some of the other things. They're going to look at what we can do around rental housing. Number of other things that happened. Last night I attended the Davis Bay Summer Park Wilson Creek Community Association. Community Association has some concerns about crabbing off the Davis Bay Pier. So we're going to be bringing that back to council. They're requesting that we prohibit fishing and crabbing on the pier. So we're going to be, because of a safety issue for the children, there's a lot of hooks, a lot of people, and they're finding there's an impact on the rest of the community. So we're going to have to see what happens in the community around that. Should be an interesting conversation. Other things that have come up. Community archives through in the Sechelt Library has come forward. There's been a request from the library to remove some of the materials by the end of November because of safety concerns, and to remove all of them by, I think they said March of next year, and turn that space back over to the library. So we're going to be looking at that. There will be some implications for the regional district inside of that we'll have to work out who covers what costs around staffing, etc. Seniors Planning Table came and did a report to us on isolation in Canadian older adults. Where this comes in, again, inside of this climate change, okay, so this is the lens. If you put the health and well-being lens on isolation in Canadian older adults, what happens if we have people who are isolated, others don't know they're there, and we have a forest fire? Right? So health and well-being, lens on that, isolation is an important issue for us to address. The other final thing that came forward is the old Gilligan site is being rezoned. It's been set up as a public assembly and did not have business. I mean, it's one of those we inherited, right? So we're making it actually where it's going to be legal to go continue and do what they want to do in that site. Yes. Couple of things coming up. Métis Day flag raising on Friday the 15th. Come out and join us if you like. And on the 30th is Light the Lights and the Festival of Lights. It's the parade down Cowrie with all of the equipment, the construction vehicles, etc. We have cement trucks and graders, and they're all covered up with lights and things. It's become quite the event. So come on out and join us. It'll be fun. It starts, I believe, at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock at Light the Lights at the Rockwood, and then proceeds on to the parade. So look forward to having you there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Seegers. Over to Roberts Creek, Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. Just like Director McMahon, I attended the Climate Leaders Institute conference and got some really juicy tidbits out of that one. one is going to be leading into the young people discussion we're going to have in a little bit. The next, probably the most meaningful conversation we had there was the AVICC breakout group on the second day, where Mayor Josie Osborne led us down a track of how can we fix transportation so that it's no longer just car bound, and that it can be inclusive. And it looks like we're going to try to set up an AVICC committee or something of the like that will look at integrating transportation, public transportation, into all densities, hopefully using BC Transit as the conduit. So looking at possibly having, where the density doesn't warrant having buses, that we have ride sharing and car sharing as part of the BC Transit model. And then even further out than that, having bike sharing and such things as part of a whole integrated model, sort of a compass card for the whole province. So you can move around the whole province using different means of transportation depending on density and depending on demand. And that was sort of a bit of a visioning that we did, and that will of course require especially the 7 regional districts to work fairly closely with each other, as well as with BC Transit. So I think there'll be more of that coming down the pipeline there. It looked very promising from our discussion, so that was very neat. And it reinvigorated certainly my passion around climate change. Director Seegers mentioned single and two-person households, and that was one of the other things that came through at that conference, was that single and two-person households are the fastest growing demographic in Canada right now. And that brought back to me the thought that in Roberts Creek we have no housing for these people to age in place, and sort of the urgency that comes with that, so that we can create sort of a means for people to downsize in place. And I think that's something that we need to think about as we're moving forward with our planning. I also attended the wreath laying in Roberts Creek, and thankfully I had Nicholas Simons there to give me a 101 on wreath laying. He's like, yeah, you should have a UBCM course on wreath laying. But anyway, he was very helpful. But for me, it was a bit of an interesting experience, being born and raised in Germany, and still remembering both my grandparents who had fought in World War II on the German side. So the irony didn't escape me. But I made a Facebook post that kind of alluded to that, and there were some really beautiful comments, and some of them were that we should remember the people that put their lives before, or the country before their lives, and no matter what side of the battle lines they were. And it also reminds us of the fragility of it all, because my grandparents were good people, and it was just the political leadership that ended up creating that. So yeah, it was a neat experience for me, being part of that and reflecting on that. And last week I also got to attend a neighborhood meeting for 10 people about a short-term rental on Fairburn Road, and yeah, so yeah, 10 people came and said, "What's going on?" and we're demanding some more action. And so I had a breakout with staff, and I think the conclusion we came to is that despite new rules coming down the pipeline, that we need to enforce the current regulations more on those houses that are a problem and continue to be a problem already. So I'm looking forward to some action there. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ties, and thank you for the reminder. We're all victims of, like, if you've been in a war, you're a victim of it. There's no real winners, and there are good people on both sides, and these things happen due to political leadership. It's a good reminder. So I will move on to the Half Moon Bay Director Report. It's been a full couple of weeks with starting with Sechelt Library Board, and then on the 26th of October, on the 28th of October, attended the second drought approach meeting that staff held for the community, and that was up at Choteleach Secondary School. It was slightly better attended by the public, but both meetings, including the one at Frank West Hall, there wasn't a lot of public there. However, the amount of survey responses has been incredible, and which is fantastic. But thank you so much to staff for putting those on, and the graphics and the information sheets and everything that were there. It was fantastic, and the people that were there were very appreciative to have that information. And then I went right from there to my community dialogue at Cooper's Green. We had about 40-ish residents there that night, and thank you, Director Toth, who came as Councillor Toth from Sechelt to help with answering questions. I have a very engaged group of residents. So it's a full, this one was only 2 hours because the advertising was right for it rather than the previous one at 3, but the community is just loving having that access and being able to ask questions and get updates on things that are happening. So the next one will be December the 2nd. And we'll continue to have them because they just seem to be a really good way to connect with people. Other things over the last couple of weeks, met with the board chair and vice chair of the Sechelt Hospital Foundation, and just to get an update, they reached out. They just wanted to let me know what they were doing, and then the vice chair attended, was in the audience for the regional hospital district meeting that we had the next day, which he found to be very valuable to get that information and hear Clive speak from VCH and hear more about what their plans are looking forward. November 5th, Johan. Oh, sorry, Johan. I said Clive, didn't I? Yeah. Johan Murray, not Clive. November 5th was the Southern Ferry Advisory Committee meeting. That was very well attended. We had lots of the Ferry Advisory Committee was there. We had a lot of staff members from BC Ferries, talked about a lot of issues, and it was a really good informative meeting. Pressured them again on the medical shared loading, as well as getting more information on what's happening with Langdale, what's happening with Horseshoe Bay. And Sean Eckford was there and had a great synopsis in the Coast Reporter for more information. And then later that day was the Rural Directors meeting, which I really enjoy getting together with the other rural directors and finding out what's going on in our neighborhoods and where we can help support each other and where we have the same things going on. Other things, met with
some of my residents in Half Moon Bay regarding Silver Road. We met with the MLA, Nicholas Simons, to discuss how we can remediate issues, because the road, being that it's a rural road, it's under MODI. And MODI has classed it as 8F, which means they don't provide any support to it. And this is a road that residents used for access, but there's also trailheads along that road too. So there's a lot of public access, and the last about 12 meters of the road is there's no proper ditching. The road is it's really, really rocky, and I wouldn't take my car on it. And my car sits higher, but it's become quite nasty, and so we're just doing some advocacy around that and trying to get it reclassed so we can get some support, because otherwise the residents have to look after it, and then they also have to accept liability, and when it's a public road, and so there's some back and forth going back over the history, and so that's and then while I was there with the MLA, I had a good conversation with him about some of our water things that are going on, and getting him to help support us and do some pressure on his side regarding our water. So, which was great. He was very receptive about that. And then later that night, local government show on Eastlink with Director Seegers and Beamish. The next day at Iced Tea, that was really great. A little worried with the fog, but we got there and we got back, so that was great. It's all you want. Or maybe you don't, I don't know, but you seem happy with us, so we'll keep going. And then, separate airplanes, chair, vice chair, and I don't know. November 11th, Remembrance Day in Sechelt was so well attended. That was really incredible to see how many people were there, and to still see that we still have a few veterans around, which is it's so important to honor and remember what's happened, and how war affects us all, and so it was a really neat ceremony to be part of, and then I think that's about it that's going on. Director McMahon?
I just wanted to add that at the climate change conference, I walk in the door first day, sit down at a table, look across at a name tag, and they're from the District of Mackenzie. Oh. So I had to say, oops, sorry, we stole your CAO.
That's great. No, I think I got everybody. Everybody's had a chance? Yeah, okay. This is why I write everyone's name down, because I don't go in any kind of order. Unless you don't make eye contact, then that's usually who I go with first.
From here, it doesn't look like he's checked off.
Oh, no, he's checked off. Perfect. So I think that's everything I had on my list. So that's it for director's reports. Other than I will just once again say I'm just so incredibly honored to once again be your chair. Like it's a woo. It's a daunting job, but I really enjoy this, and I'm just happy about how, as one reporter put it, had it the collegial dinner party atmosphere we hope continues. Couldn't resist. So sorry, Sophie. No, not really. Sorry, not sorry. Okay, yes. Director Hiltz.
Yes, Chair. Did we cover off item 6?
Item 6? Yes,
Yep.
we did.
We did, okay.
We did.
Okay.
I have it checked off. Yeah, we did. Okay. All right. No, that was important to note, because sometimes you get busy and you forget these things. So, okay. So moving on, the new business, we have youth engagement, number 7 on our agenda. So this is verbal. And this stands partly because of the climate change conference. Director Ties had a few thoughts coming out of there, but it's also something that is near and dear to my heart. And Director Ties, do you want to start off on this?
Sure. So at the Climate Leader Conference, we had the opportunity to have about 10 young people come and do a presentation of what they've been doing and how they feel about what made them get involved in these causes, and very, very inspiring stories, as well as just blown away at how well spoken and really passionate these folks were from all walks of life. And then we had some breakout groups where basically one of these youths would come to one table, and we would be given some questions to ask them, or they would ask us questions, and so it was sort of a bit of a led dialogue essentially, so yeah, it was very inspiring, and at that point, I did go, well, we were really missing that voice at our table, and especially when you're looking through the lens of climate change, I think we really need to have youth involved, because they're the ones that are going to be carrying the burden of our decisions in the future, because they're the ones that are going to survive us. So in that regard, I'd like to see if there's anything that we can do to have the youth involved more in what we do here at the SCRD. Gibson's has led the way with a beautiful addition of those youth counselors, and I know we have our limitations around daytime meetings and such things that. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of kick off a conversation and maybe a bit of a brainstorm on how we can engage youth more here at the SCRD and do it in a meaningful way, because that was one of the big messages, was let's get away from tokenism, and let's actually have some meaningful engagement.
So, thank you for bringing this forward, because I didn't want to be the one lone voice on this, but I'm glad to see some interest amongst the board. So I'm going to go through a few things, and then we'll open it up around. Gibson started last year with their student counselors, and the town district of Fernie has now introduced a student counselor to their table as well, which is fantastic. School districts around the province, the school district here on the Sunshine Coast has had a student trustee that's sat at the table for, I think the 7th, maybe the 8th a year that there's been a student trustee there, and then Vancouver School District also has a student trustee program, and then a variety of school districts around the province do. So there's been resistance around those too. So I just want to put it out there that there's different things that are already going on at the elected level around the province. There's one thing that we did discuss with the chair and the vice chair of the school district when we met was bringing in student voice and how to meaningfully do it, because that's one thing that when we meet during the day, it is difficult. However, there are other avenues, for example, with the Area Planning Commission. Our corporate officer and I had a very, very brief conversation about, looking at a mechanism for that. So that's certainly something we can do. I've had a conversation with the chair and the superintendent of the school district about how to best bring in that student voice into our organization. And it was suggested by the superintendent that they have a mechanism, which with the district student leadership team, which, if we wanted to bring issues forward maybe to them a monthly basis or something, or present to them with, maybe issues that we're dealing with. Because one thing to keep in mind is we have to remember that as high school students especially are very busy, and school must be a priority for them. This is part of their learning opportunity, so we want to make sure it's of value for them as well. But we don't want to be asking them to sit in on an 8-hour day, one day, a couple of days a month, like we do. So, one thing I've also found valuable is I meet the Half Moon Bay Elementary Student Council, which is primarily grade 6 and grade 7 students. Meet about once a month and find out what's on their mind. And they've got a lot of great ideas, and they have a lot of things that they want to see change. And, whether it's talking about recycling, talking about transit, talking about road safety, like who do we talk to here? One thing I found with them is I'm going to go with, rather than saying, hey, what do you want to change, is maybe go to them with one idea and say, hey, okay, or one problem. Like, how do you want to, we're looking at, I'll use the student transit as one, like, so what do you want to see a change in there? So there's lots of different ways that we can look at bringing something in. So it's the will of the board on how you want to do it in a way that's meaningful. We have a lot of interest at the elected level and at the staff level at the school district to bring it forward. So I think it's just, Director Beamish, if would you like to speak to your experience?
Yeah, no, I think it's the
microphone, please.
The challenge, of course, is one of timing, and we have a 3:00 in the afternoon committee meeting, which we're able to just kind of cuts that into school off, which has been excellent. And then, of course, our council meetings are in the evening, and the students are dedicated, and they want to be there, and they come. We, as you know, we offer them a honorarium to attend the meetings, and that goes into a education reserve for them, which they get on graduation, so that our grade 11 student will get that reserve, given to her when she graduates. But involving them in, like, the students, two students that we have, Alice and Gravity, they're both involved in the youth movement on climate change. And Alice, I think, was one of the starters of that youth movement with her school anyway. Involving them, I think, maybe looking for opportunities for referrals. They have, for example, environmental club at the school, and there could be opportunities to simply say, we are considering this matter. Your input into this would be welcome, and here's how to do it. Making room for that, giving them an opportunity to have that input. Reaching out to them by going to the schools. I did make presentations last year to the environmental club during Water Month, and went there and talked to them, and they were very receptive. The Elphinstone School has an Interact Club, which is a leadership club out of Rotary, and they have about 20 students who are a member of that, and they're very interested. So finding ways for us to go into the school and interact with the students, rather than relying on them to have to come out of the school at different times, could be very opportune. So there could be some ways that we could do it, and I think that recognizing the importance of students and reaching out to them to be involved in advisory planning commissions and things of this nature, making room for them, specifically student position, so that it is actually a recognized position on an advisory planning committee or another committee, and acknowledging that. So I think we must do those things. I mean, we voted to reduce the voting age to 16. We need to involve them, and we need to prepare them, and whatever we can do to do that, we need to work together on and coordinate ourselves with too. It's not a competition. It's a coordination how we can involve students on the coast.
Okay, so I have a list. I'm going to start with Director Ties, and then I have Director Hiltz, McMahon, and Seegers.
Well, I personally like the idea of maybe having a coast-wide youth council or something like that actually spans all three secondary schools and four, all four secondary schools, and but that would mean that I think that we would probably need to provide some kind of an assistance in one, setting it up, creating a terms of reference, putting the sort of the mechanisms in place so that because it'd be great if some youth would come out of that initiative and would do that on their own. But I think if we give them some incentive to do that might actually work, as well as some sort of a carrot to actually be part of that youth council, whether it's a resume booster or whether it's an honorarium for people, or I think there needs to be some resources put into that if we were going to go down that route.
So one thing to note with the district student leadership team, which is already a mechanism that's in place within the school district, does encompass all of the schools, as well as if homeschooled students do want to be a part of it, they can put in an application through the school district as well. So they meet monthly, and they have a grade, at least 2 representatives from each school, a grade 11 and a grade 12, and they also do a yearly forum with the trustees with a larger group of students, so they have a larger student body, and it's all led by students. So we already have a very active leadership plan already in place. So, when I'm saying, we want to, make sure that we are creating space, that is one mechanism to go to them with. Like, they could have a second forum if we wanted, and that's one of the things the superintendent has said, whatever we want to do, come with them with ideas, and they'll work with us to make something happen. So rather than starting a new youth council, there is maybe already something in place, and I'll put you back on the list, Bill, too, for after. So I'll go over to Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so that's my question, is what we have right now on the list of committees is the Sunshine Coast Youth Awareness Committee, which is an SCRD committee. Does that exist, or has it existed before, and what's been I don't know anything about it. It's just a list on a...
So the Youth Action Awareness Committee?
Youth Awareness Committee.
YAC, yeah. So that has, that's primarily a staff committee, and it also encompasses, so when I say staff, it encompasses, there's typically a trustee from the school district and an elected representative from here, but then there's also from VCH, MCFD, there's the glossary of terms again, why we need it, Vancouver Coastal Health, Ministry of Children and Family Development, as well as staff members from the school district. I'm not sure if we have any staff members that actually sit on that. I think it's just the elected. So from different agencies that support family and youth. And I haven't seen any minutes from it lately, so I don't even know the last time they met.
They're still meeting.
They are still meeting? Okay, perfect. I haven't seen the minutes at all, so I haven't seen the minutes, I should say, since I left the school district, so I'm not sure. So, and you had another?
Well, is it something that we can get some of the minutes or information about that committee to come?
Sure. Yep. So we'll make a note of that. So YAC notes. Youth Action Awareness Committee. Okay, Director McMahon.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways we can approach this. I should say also that I'd be interested to find out what education students get on local government. Because when I was in school, the answer was none. 0. Yeah, and that's important too, because in fact, if the voting age does get lowered, they need to know anyway. I mean, this is the closest level of government to home, and it's really important that students should know more about how it works. We can either build in things around our structure, or another way to look at it might be to think about some approaches to a particular issue, like free bus passes for students would be an issue around which we could build a little consultation or collaboration. Perhaps doing a survey that would be easy to do on your phone, that could engage students. I don't think we would need to have a student at all of our meetings. I think we should look at maybe putting a student on a committee. PMAC actually would be a very good one. It's just starting up. It meets in the afternoon. I can't remember what time we're meeting, to tell you the truth, but I think it's late afternoon. So, another option would be to simply put a student on one of our standing committees, such as infrastructure. And then they would only be committed to one morning once a month, rather than, a full day or something like that. The other option, of course, is to go out to them. When I was in high school, we actually had an all-candidates meeting at the high school, which was an excellent opportunity to learn about local politics. We don't have an election this year, thank heavens. But what opportunities do we have to go out? At the conference, it was noted that UBCM has funding to send students to events like UBCM and AVICC. So if we identify some students, that would be great. We could kind of adopt them and drag them along to I think AVICC would be a particularly good one because it's not as large and it's a little more local in its scope. It was noted the importance of building some value in for the students, which we've talked about a bit. One example was of an event was that Squamish holds an annual Public Works Day for youth, where students tour around all the facilities that Squamish has. And I think that kind of intrigued me for a number of reasons. It's not just educating students about how these things work, but not every student is going to go off to university. And there might be a job opportunity aspect to this. Finally, I just make the note that under the new Societies Act, nonprofits can change their bylaws to allow under 18s to be on their boards. And so if you know any local nonprofits that would be of interest to youth, we can encourage them to look at that and include a youth member on their boards too.
Great, and that's a good point. PMAC stands for Plan Monitoring. Oh, you got it? Okay, great. Plan Monitoring Advisory Committee, and it's for the Solid Waste Management Plan. Okay. Sorry, I just didn't want to interrupt Director McMahon while she was speaking. So, and those are some good points. I really like the idea of having a PMAC rep because I think that's something that speaks to a lot of the issues that are going on right now, especially with disposable items, garbage, and everything. And I think there might be some options to look at that. I'll put you on. I've got Director Seekers and then Director Beamish, and then I'll put you on again, Andres. Okay, Director Seekers.
Thank you. So Gibson's currently has meetings twice a month, like every second week, right? So less meetings. So we just have to keep that in mind when we're talking about volume. I do know as well, District of Seashop used to have afternoon meetings, and I think everyone on our council is working. So we've changed our meetings. We will always keep the meetings to a Wednesday, and our committee of the whole meetings don't start typically until 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon, and council meetings are in the evening. There is a cost because you won't have as many staff coming, but there is a cost for having staff attending those meetings in the evening. But besides youth, what about other people in the community who are working? How does that allow them to come if all the meetings are during the day? And we're not the only ones. If you look around the community, how many meetings do we go to during the day of all kinds of committees up and down the coast? Students can't go because the meetings are during the day. So this is a message to take out to other boards and other organizations as well. They say they want to engage the youth, but they don't actually make the meetings at a time when youth can come. So it's something to keep in mind. And during the last election, I had people some of them who are elected, others who weren't elected, but they came to me and they said, I have a concern about meetings. I can't take off every day to go to a meeting. I have to be able to work with that. And so I said, when we come in, depending on the makeup of the council, we will change the meetings to accommodate. And we did that. So that might be something that you'll need to look at here, not only for youth, but to have others engaged in the community as well.
Director Beamish, back to you.
Just briefly again, I think Director McMahon brought up a point of including students with opportunities to go to conferences. I mean, House Sound Forum is an ideal one. It's a one-day thing. Most kids now, especially in grade 11 or 12, are used to field trips and can get that time away if we can build it in the system. And providing those opportunities for them to UBCM or AVICC or House Sound Forum as an incentive. We have to build it into our budgets, but I'm sure we could do that. But I think the other thing we need to do is we need to ask the youth, how do they want to be involved? How can they be involved? And we need to go out to them in that way and just say that we'd like to involve you. We'd like to include you in our conversations. How can we do that? And see and just actively reach out to them. And they may have ideas that we have not even thought about, sort of thing. And so that I think that we're taking some time to do that and helping to get it right. And then making sure that if we have that system, whether it's through a organization within the school, like the environmental club or the other clubs they've got, or through the student council, copying them on correspondence, that is relevant to those kinds of issues that they are interested in. Let's hear what they want. Let's send them copies of letters. We're sending letters to the minister, copy it to the Alphonston High School student council, and get them involved. And but I think we need to give them the opportunities and not as a bunch of senior citizens sit around trying to plan for them. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I said senior citizens. I think we need to ask them.
That's true. Director Ties.
That student leadership forum sounds great, and I think a first step could be that we create a presentation and a delegation to go and present to them. It's like, this is the Sunshine Coast Regional District. We want to hear more from you. How do we make that happen? And whether it's a quarterly presentation from them to hear, or or we have or we have some designated one of the directors or two of the directors are designated liaisons with them to attend their meeting and say, hey, so these are the things that they brought up to us. I think that to me kind of makes sense to use the institutions that are already there, but to actually say, hey, we want to listen and we want to be involved, or we want you to be involved. So how do we want to make this happen?
Director Toth?
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to add. We talked a lot about times and evenings versus daytime and things like that. One thing about meeting here is the location sucks for transit. I'm looking at the BC Transit schedule right now for stopping outside. It's like 10 to 12 or 2 o'clock. There's no good times for transit service to this property. So it's something to consider too. I think going out is a lot easier. But anyways, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Before we start to wrap this up, or as we start to wrap this up, there is a couple of things I would like to note that we have actually had student voice at, there was a student rep on an APC back in the 90s up in Pender Harbor. And I found out when I did a presentation with student trustee Deasy, and that was about 18 months or so ago, she was actually on a committee in Sechelt as a student rep. So we have had some, but it'd be great to formalize it.
Downtown business, downtown revitalization.
Yeah. So there's we need to, I think, make a concerted effort for creating space, and so I'm going to look to the directors and see, because I'm hearing, and I've seen our corporate officer studiously taking notes over there too, because I think she understands that there might be a motion coming out of this, and I think the first thing to note that if there is anything that might have financial implications for this upcoming budget year, that we need to make sure that we give something to staff right away so they can bring a proposal forward. So whether it's even holding a forum, or we need to make sure that we've put something aside for that. If we want staff to investigate bringing students into our advisory committees, if it's we've had a great conversation about this, but do we have something that we want to ask staff to look into more, or where do we want to go? I'm going to go to Director Lee because you haven't spoken yet, and then I'll back to Director McMahon.
I've been listening, but the first realistic one I heard for a student in Pender Harbor, because of the distance, is a student rep on a Pender APC. Seems the adult representatives in my community probably get the most interaction with us through that APC as well. And they get to look at all issues. If we were to combine that with the education honorarium that I heard earlier, it might be a win-win for everybody. And our APCs are held in the evening, and I'm sure we could arrange to get the student there by volunteers. So that's one thought that kind of struck me out of all this conversation.
Director McMahon.
Yeah, in Area E, I don't think the APC would be the best spot. But I will talk to the Community Association to see if they would be open to having a student on their group. I would like to ask the question, could we put a student on PMAC? And yes, we'd have to deal with the transportation issue to get them here, but that seems to me to be something that we could do now, and it's a relevant issue.
Director Tice?
Yeah, and I think we should reach out to the Student Leadership Forum and see if we can, if they want to have us do a presentation to them and maybe a dialogue. I don't think that would cost much money, and I think it would could create some meaningful ideas.
All right, Director McMahon.
Yeah, back to PMAC again. I guess there's a question about is there any restrictions or whatever for us to appoint a student to PMAC, and whether or not they could be a voting member of PMAC. So
I'm going to go over to the corporate officer to this, please.
Thank you, Chair. So if you do make the recommendation, I will look into it and get back to you with options. It could be as simple as amending the terms of reference.
Yeah, okay. So I hear a motion from you. Okay. So Director McMahon is going to make a motion that the staff come back with a report in regards to putting a youth member on PMAC. Is that sufficient? I'm glad I said that. Corporate officer?
Thank you, Chair. I could suggest that we broaden it to all advisory committees if you wish.
Yes.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Director McMahon did say that.
Okay.
And Director Toth seconded. Any further discussion? And would that include Director McMahon, would that include the APCs as well?
Sure, why not?
Okay, so all advisory committees. Thank you. Okay, any questions on that motion that's Director McMahon brought forward to a future committee? Okay. Okay. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Do you have that, Jennifer? Okay. Does anybody want that read back? We all heard Director McMahon's words loud and clear, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. And so from Director Ties, I heard a motion to approach the school district about hosting a student leadership forum.
Yeah, I'm
No,
just
not
not
quite.
clear whether that's the chair that would do that, or whether it's staff that would do that, or whether that's.
And I hear Director Seegers has a different idea.
Well, you indicated that they have a student leadership team already.
Yeah, district student leadership team.
So I would suggest we reach out to them and do a presentation to the student leadership team, probably a little bit overview of the areas of responsibility that we have, and ask how they'd like to be involved.
Okay. And to clarify the process on that, it would be either the elected approaching the elected or staff approaching staff on that to move it forward. Elected, maybe first, and then to staff after that. Staff has enough to do. We'll bend arms. And it is something, like I said, it's already been a baseline conversation, so it's just a matter of moving it forward here. Okay, so Director Lee?
What is a district student leadership forum?
Oh, so the district student leadership team, it has representatives, typically a grade 11 and a grade 12 student from each one of the 4 high schools. So Pender Harbor Secondary, Chottle-Leach, Elphinstone, and the Sunshine Coast Alternative School. They meet monthly with senior management, so with usually principals, the superintendent, secretary, treasurer, and maybe the directors of instruction as well. And they discuss what's going on within the schools. They bring forward issues. They also arrange things like the North versus South hockey tournament. So they arrange dances sometimes too. So they, and they arrange the challenges against one another too. For example, with food bank challenges. So they act as a conduit for each one of the student bodies to speak to one another and find ways of moving things forward. From the district student leadership team, they elect one of those members to be the student trustee that actually sits at the school board table. Okay? And then each year they have a forum in which they bring forward more of the students, more of a cross-section of students, so usually about 40, 50 students altogether to meet with the student trustees, with the school board trustees, as well as senior staff, principals from the school, and talk about global issues, so things like student mental health, transportation, technology, and issues that are affecting youth. So the students have a direct line to decision makers. Okay? Yeah, Director Beamish.
Should have had that when I was in school.
I think the one thing that's important is that we coordinate closely with the school board so that they know what is our intent is and happening, and we try to have that coordination before they read it in the newspaper. That's what we found last year. They said, "You're doing what?" And so that it was just very important that we kind of reach out to them early and say, "We had this discussion. You're going to hear about it." And,
I'll text the board chair as soon as we're done here. Director Hills?
I'm interested in the funding that's available. At UBCM, I had a discussion with one of the fellow from the Interior who was there as part of the student council, and his UBCM week was funded by UBCM, so I don't know how you even get access to that. So whether there could be a little investigation about the funding opportunities for to support a student to go to one of these events. So I would
Do we want that as a motion to staff, or do we want to investigate it as directors? Because we can probably look into it pretty quickly and find it. So, you know what? I'll task myself with that. Is that okay? And I'll bring forward information. Oh, yes, and we can all look for it. Director, Director Lee?
When I looked up a secondary school, I found one that's called Secondary Spider 7 to 12 as part of the secondary.
That's
school.
part of Sunshine Coast Alternative School.
Oh.
So, yes, so that's essentially the SPIDER program is for students taking courses either online or homeschooled students.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So they're included too, of course.
Oh, yes, so they're included as part of the alternative school.
Okay. Thanks.
Do you want know more about the school board? Okay. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so Director Ties, we had a motion going on there. Do we have or Jennifer, did you get something together there with, please?
I had that staff come back with a report. Oh, sorry, it's the second one. To approach the district student leadership team to offer a presentation and ask how they would like to be involved. And then there was the discussion that it would be elected approach first and then approach staff after that.
Director Ties, does that work for you? Yeah. Okay, great. And may I have a seconder for that? Seconded. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. And then UBCM, AVICC, we'll look into separately, so we don't have to ask staff to do that. We'll do that as elected and come back with future options. Yeah. Well, and that's something that we'd need to work closely with the school board on as well, because or see if we wanted to, how we wanted to bring that forward. So I think that's part of the school board conversation. Okay, is there anything else that we'd like to bring forward as part of the youth engagement piece, or is this a good start? Excellent start. Wonderful. Okay, staff, do you need us to clarify anything else, or we're good?
Thank you, Chair. We're good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next on our list, number 8, the Gibson's Green site. Director McMahon.
Yeah, well, there's been concerns expressed about access to that site by commercial small operators. And I wanted first to ask staff where we are with that. I remember that we discussed it, but I can't remember if there were any actions going forward on what to do about that site.
I'm going to go over to GM Rosenboom, please.
Thank you for the question. The current bylaw in terms of what we accept and how we process and handle commercial green waste states that we need to collect a tipping fee. So it's user fee based, and for residential green waste, it's paid for out of taxation. That's why we're at a transfer station and at the landfill. There's a scale, so commercial entities drive up there and get weight, and based on the difference between in and out, they pay their user fee. At the South Coast Depot or the South Coast drop-off location, there's currently no scale and no permanent attendant available. Hence, we're not able to collect any fees there, and hence, to date, we've not. The policy has been to not accept commercial green waste at the site. Currently, we are in discussions with staff from the town of Gibsons to see what the opportunities are to come to an alternative approach. And we hope to be able to provide some alternative options early next year for the board's consideration, because it might require changes in bylaws, et cetera, to make that happen.
Director McMahon.
Okay, the concern here is that most of these commercial operators are in fact one-person shows. They are gardeners or landscapers, and they have their own pickup truck or whatever, and they are going to people's homes, usually senior citizens, and cleaning their yards, and the senior citizens have paid their taxes to use the green waste site. So it creates a problem if the small operators cannot drop off the green waste. It's ridiculous to have them drive all the way to Seashell for the GHG emissions and also just for the time involved, because it's very expensive for them to take that much time off in the middle of a working day. I think we need to come up with some kind of an option here. One suggestion that was made is that we have an annual permit for small contractors. We could even do this as a trial program for a year to see if it has a significant impact on the volumes received at that site. I know a lot of the commercial people are using this by stealth, by taking the signs off their trucks when they drive up or whatever. But it's that the enforcement has been spotty, but apparently lately there's been a little more enforcement, and it's creating hardship for these very small operators. I will also note that the way the drop-off is designed in Gibson's, you could not take a really large vehicle in there. It's only basically pickup trucks or a car and a trailer that can utilize the site. So I don't think that we're facing huge volumes of material. The other thing that was raised is that commercial operators are being encouraged to go up to the gravel pit and use their burner, but do we really want all this stuff being burned? Is that actually a good idea? I suspect that the simplest and most cost-effective way to deal with this would be to come up with a system so that the small contractors can use the Gibson's green waste drop-off.
Director Hiltz?
Yeah, I'm going to continue on with the Director McMahon's ideas. So my question would be for staff is, my understanding is the SCRD contributes funding to the town of Gibson's to operate the site. So I'm wondering, what are the conditions around the operating the site? Is that within the town of Gibson's? Is it a contract? Is it a verbal? Or is it, I'm not sure how that relationship is, how formal that relationship is. So whether the staff monitoring the site have something to follow other than the sign that's on the concrete blocks. And I'm just wondering if they've had any training. What is, I'm wondering what their role is.
So, GM, please.
Thank you for the question. We're currently reviewing exactly the questions you're asking with the town. So I would, if you're okay, would prefer to include those answers in the future staff report. Thank you.
One thing that, bye, Director Beamish. It's been lovely to have you. He has another meeting, so he's really leaving us. Okay. One thing that came up through my community has been and Director McMahon just touched on it as well, with the seniors who are no longer able to do their own yard work and have to hire someone. And then, so if a contractor is just looking after, or if it's a neighbor that's coming up and looking after someone, is there a method to, so that the homeowner can apply for, one truckload of waste free or green waste free, if there's some kind of program like that we could, maybe potentially bring in as well.
The report that will be brought forward to the board will be a not South Coast specific report. It will be a coast specific report, so that it's coast wide. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? Okay, Director Hiltz.
Just to add some historical context, as early as 2010, this was an issue in West Howe Sound, and it was sent letters to the SCRD at the time, and I think we're still in that situation.
Director McMahon.
Yeah, I guess I would say that until we have a chance to look at this, it would be nice if staff would not be too zealous at trying to enforce the rules at the green waste drop-off. It would be appreciated.
Director Seegers.
I respectfully have to disagree. From previous years, one of the reasons why this happened was contractors, commercial contractors, recognized that there was nobody at the South Coast drop-off facility. And so instead of going to the one where they had to pay, they, happily drove to Gibson's to drop off the material. And the volume grew astronomically. So it's something that needs to be dealt with, but I don't think we can just open it up at this point. We're already subsidizing green waste collection, and we need to just get a handle on how to deal with it properly.
Jim?
I wouldn't mind to receive direction on the scope of the options you would like me to present.
Right. Okay, so directors, you don't want to write a book? Okay, how big of a scope do you want? Jen, do you have anything for us, maybe? GM Rosenboom.
One of the recommendations could be to bring forward a report with options to have a fair and equal process that allows for small operators to bring green waste to the South Coast drop-off site.
Okay. Does that, okay? Okay, so Director McMahon makes that motion. And seconded by Director Seegers. Any further conversation on that? And within that, if looking at the seniors population as well, that would be terrific. Okay, okay. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, so, wow, all right. We do have to move in camera, so I'd like a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91A, C, D, K, and 2B of the Community Charter. So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. After questions, we'll take a 5-minute break and then go into our closed. But I will go to Camilla or Donna. Do you have any questions? No? No? Media? No? Nothing? Yes, please. Excellent.
November 30th. Oh, November 30th. November 30th. Oh, okay. I have some light lights. Would you do them December 6th? Would you take it up with you? December 6th? That's finance and things. Oh, sure.
Oh, yes.
Okay, sure. I'll take it.